I think we should start by perhaps setting some context around which we can talk. And there's no point really in talking about healthcare without talking about how we finance healthcare. So what I'd like to do, Judit, if I may, is start with the healthcare budget. What is the actual budget? How much of that is set aside for pharma? And where do we think there are any shortfalls? And then perhaps we can bring in the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind invitation. It's extremely difficult to talk about budget without presenting figures and graphs and anything else, but I try because I think most of them already heard from my side the most important thing. So the pharmaceutical spending increased, I think, as it was mentioned in the IQVIA presentation. Sorry for the IQVIA presentation, that it's increasing. Mainly in line with the average of the worldwide increase. But it's very important that a couple of years ago, around 5 or 6 years ago, we implemented a new reimbursement category, which is for the orphan drug and item-based reimbursement, which creates a new category in the pharmaceutical spending. Why is it important? Because we always have to add it when we talk about the pharmaceutical spending. So it's not just about the prescription-based medicine and not just about the prescription-based reimbursement, because it's still increasing in an average, I think 8 or 9% per year. But we have to add these item-based reimbursement schemes, which is increasing huge, enormously huge in the past couple of years. So I think there are more or less enough money on the pharmaceutical spending. What we have to take into consideration is the allocation of whether if it is good or not. Do we have a good allocation program for the reimbursement, for spending the reimbursement? Of course, the healthcare spending increasing enormously because of the payment increase of the doctors. So there was a huge explosion in the salary of the doctors 2 years ago, and it has a result that the healthcare spending increased enormously. So it's nearly doubled in the last 15 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Judit. It is, of course, one thing to have money. It's another thing to how you cut up the pie. So let's perhaps develop that down the panel, and it makes sense to move down. So, Katalin, how do you feel? Well, perhaps we should say, do you agree that there's enough money to start with? And then, and I should also say, thank you very much. It's really, really, really important that we have someone from the government here. So we appreciate you. You joining into the table. But Katalin, let's just try and push back a little bit on that. Is it enough? And then is the allocation appropriate?
It's a hard question, having Judit next to me. With all my respect to Judit, but no. And I know that we don't agree on that point. So first of all, the actual spending increases. However, if you count the inflation, and if you're corrected with the inflation, then the picture is not so good anymore. Of course, it's not only for the pharmaceutical budget, but it's in general. So that's one thing. The other thing, which we had actually a discussion about this last week, I think, whether or not we should increase the budget of healthcare in Hungary or not. We were arguing that we should increase at least to the level of the CE average, which we are far from at the moment. However, at the same time, I do agree with Judit that there is not proper allocation in terms of the healthcare. So probably the efficiency could be and should be increased. Now, on the pharma, we could always argue for more money, but I think that's not the point, and we shouldn't it shouldn't be like a good sign to argue for more money. What we should argue for is to have less burden on the pharmaceutical industry. And that's very important because at the moment the burden is so high that actually the pharmaceutical industry cannot breathe. And that's true for generics and that's true for innovatives. So it's not just a one-sided thing. And I don't want to argue in this sense only for the member companies of our association, but I think it's a general question. And why I think it's important is actually the one which Zsolt from IQVIA was mentioning, these shortages, that it's coming. Drugs are more of a scarce resource in the world, and we are competing actually for less and less resources. And if we cannot be competitive as a country, no matter if it's generics or innovatives, then we will have difficulties and we will have problems. So that's why we should just have like a bit more breathing space for the industry. And if we will have that, I'm sure that we could just foster a bit both the local industry and both bringing innovation and foreign direct investments to the country.
Thank you very much. Wolfgang, perhaps more than anyone at the table, you have an international aspect that you can bring to bear. So are you, I'll ask the same question but in a slightly different way. Are you happy with the allocations? And Katalin just mentioned that you're competing, pharmacies are competing internationally for even basic drugs. So how do you see that playing out? Are you worried that Hungary is in perhaps a less good position?
Well, yeah, a difficult question, but maybe let me start to say I think there's never enough money for healthcare, and it doesn't. It's not a Hungarian situation. It's all over the world, or at least let's say in Europe or what we call the Western world, just because of the demographics. We have a huge pressure here, and we cannot only solve this with money. We have to deal with efficiency. Maybe we'll speak later about this. As far as the budget for Hungary is concerned, I would say, if you look at the history, there's a nice tradition of overspending. So the budget is never enough. It was never. And if we see the figures for this year, I think we will have, at least in the pharma, the budget for pharmaceuticals, an overspending of about, I don't know, 5%. And the budget what is allocated for next year is round about that what we expect for this year, meaning there will be also an overspending in the next year. But as I said, there's never enough money. And if I calculated it just right, I mean the forint is very volatile, but we're talking about around about 2 billion what the government allocates for pharmaceuticals. But please correct me in case, because the budget for pharma is there's not one, there are several baskets. The allocation, yeah, well, I mean, this is also difficult. As we say, there's not enough money in the system overall, and it's never enough. Of course, everywhere is more needed. If I may take a bit the stance for pharmacies and along the value chain, the Hungarian pharmacies have at the moment a margin of 8.4%. Which is down from 9.2% 12 months ago. And I think these are margins which are, I think it's already the lowest in Europe. And so there's, I would say that there's clear allocation problem. And, but again, money is overall missing, and this is an overall problem in healthcare, and efficiency, I think, is the topic which we should stress here.
I see a trend developing. And in a sense, asking people if they want more money is like asking turkeys if they don't want Christmas. You know what the answer is going to be. Just before we go to Matt, do you want to come back on that figure of 2 billion HUF? Does that seem realistic? Does that sound?
Euro.
Euro. Sorry, euro.
That's why I did not react.
Here you go.
I have to calculate it.
Here you go.
Yeah. I would like to react on some points, but I don't know if it is the time or just after Matt.
Well, we'll hear from Matt, and then you can react to everyone. How about that? Now, I should say, Matt and I spoke yesterday separately for this. We're doing an interview for not the next issue of the paper, but the one after that. And so, on the back of that conversation, rather, I know that efficiency, which we've already heard 2-3 times now, is something that's well, not maybe front of center, but it's very top of your approach. So, same general question to you, Matt. Are you? I won't ask you about the money. But are you happy with the? Are you happy with the allocation? And perhaps we should begin to develop that efficiency idea. Do you see where can we improve this allocation? Where can we improve the efficiencies?
Sure. So good morning, everybody. Happy to be here, and thanks to the BBJ for the invitation. Looking forward, and also thanks for the different stakeholders here at the table. I think it's a great sign that we're all here talking and engaging in a productive dialogue. In terms of the question of should there be more money, and then should we allocate that money better, I would say instead of one or the other, for me it's both, right? So I think actually as a percentage of GDP and a percentage of total money going into the system, I think that there should be more coming in Hungary comparatively, as Wolfgang mentioned. But maybe just developing a few arguments that this panel can get into. I think this topic of efficiency, and I would actually put more under value, is probably more important than anything. I know this is near and dear to Judith's heart as well. But right now, the tools that we have to effectively evaluate the effectiveness of the spend that is deployed within Hungary is not where it should be. And so the flip side of that, though, is that Hungary has a tremendous advantage, more so than many other different countries in the region and across Europe as well, in that we have a completely uniform and centralized data source all the way from the patient system, from the ESCT system to eMedsol, to the NAOC data, to then a centralized system. Like, we have the data to be able to make these decisions and try to figure out what's working, but also then I think now we have the ability of an infrastructure and healthcare stakeholders that are in place. And also with the EU presidency coming next year, we're at a real inflection point in healthcare where the next 12 to 18 months are going to be absolutely critical to deploy new resources, deploy new solutions, and really figure out if we're going to be able to make this into something new. So I would just turn the question slightly differently, that if we look at this question how we always have looked at it, which is should we have a little bit more money, should we have more drugs, what should we do? Then we're going to get to the same answers we've always gotten to. And so I think this is a really nice opportunity over the next year or so where we can look at this problem from a different angle and hopefully have some new answers to the same old question.
Thank you, Matt. You wanted to respond?
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much. No, just on just point. I think this is the most difficult question, how to really evaluate whether there is enough money or not enough money for the pharmaceutical, because there are different angles. And I would like to challenge the view of the pharmaceutical spending correlation to the inflation, because it should mean, and I would try to really ask and see yourself inside that it is valid only if there is cost-based pricing. And it's then, because then there is a relevance for linking it to the inflation. If it's not a cost-based pricing, it's a total different question. And I think the majority of the products, and especially the innovative products, are not cost-based anymore, because it's value-based pricing, and the value, how we inflated the value in the last year. So it's an extremely difficult question. So I would really skip this comparison to link the ratio and the pharmaceutical spending on the together with the inflation. So it's a very difficult question, and why I think the allocation is most important, because I think we spend now an enormous percentage, high percentage of the pharmaceutical spending based on individual reimbursement, and this is not a very good allocation. It means that the patient have to ask for the reimbursement by themselves or by represented them by the doctors, and it's not the most efficient way to. And we should have the decision whether we would like to reimburse it, like we can afford to reimburse a drug or not. And if there is a decision, we have to reimburse it via a normal reimbursement system and not based on, and not bypassing the reimbursement system and based on individual requests. So I think this is the most important focus point. And I'm quite engaged, and all the panelists are aware that I'm quite engaged to move on that way, that start a regular reimbursement decision, communicate it to the companies, both and the patient and the doctor, that this is okay, this we can allow, we can afford that to use it, and have a decision, an exact decision within time. I'm not for the German reimbursement system, for example, and this will be my last sentence. I promise that that in Germany it has that every drug has a reimbursement right after when there is a marketing authorization, and there is a full reimbursement, and after a couple of years there is an analysis whether it's cost effective or not, the real world evidence has the impact or not, and then they withdraw from the market if it is not cost effective. So it's not the efficiency itself, but the cost effectiveness. I cannot imagine that the Hungarian population can tolerate this kind of method, this kind of measure. So that's why we have to have a decision in advance and have a decision on that we would like to reimburse, that we consider it as cost effective. Of course, we can ask for some guarantee from the company side that you should guarantee that this, you promised us that this will be cost effective, please guarantee it. So this is a situation, but it's very important.
Could I just come back to that, because that's Matt very modestly said he's the least experienced person or least qualified person at this table, and that's clearly not true. How far away are you from a situation where you can agree what the reimbursement system should be? Is this these are ongoing conversations, I assume, but can you see a 5-year timeline when you've got everything sorted out, or is 5 years too far away?
It's difficult to say, and it wouldn't be valid if I say anything, because it's just a bet. So I would rather say to have an agreement, and that's why I would like really to have a cooperation with the pharmaceutical industry and all the healthcare industry, that we can have an agreement on we should have an agreement on the priorities. What we would like to focus for, is it allowed, because in some hand we are always hurted because of the huge co-payment person, and if we compare to the other countries, maybe there is a large volume of out-of-pocket payment, but on the other hand, we are always hurted and challenged why there are some low-price drug and low reimbursement, because when there is a co-payment, it's below €1. So it's really a peanut. It's less than a bus ticket, or so it's really nothing for a month or a 3 months treatment either. So it's always difficult. So we have to agree on the priorities, what we would like to focus for, and we have to and then we have to make aware all the parliament and all the government, these are the priorities we would like to go for, and that should be the basis of the calculation.
Thank you. Katalin, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something which Judit touched upon a bit, and that's the inclusion in the reimbursement system. And here, I mean, it's not yours to say, but I would like to praise Judit a bit and Judit's work, because we are making like a huge step, or actually the government is making a huge step forward in this respect, because that's something that we've been arguing for quite a long time, to have reimbursement and to have new drugs available in a regular reimbursement system, not to overwhelm the individual request system, and also to have predictability in the system of what is reimbursed. And now we are getting to this point, and it's a huge step, I think, and also what mentioned by Matt is that we are sitting all together here. I think that's also something that we have to mention, that we have these kind of very positive outcomes of the last couple of months' work, or actually it's a work of years probably for you. But that's also something that is a step towards, I think, a good direction. Of course, it needs to be followed by other steps. So that's what we argued for, is to have like regular reimbursement and to have predictability in this sense. But I think it would ease also on the side of the government's budget and ease on the side of the industry's predictability. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Just a sentence that by this time I calculated, and you're right. It depends on how we calculate, because there is a reimbursement, of course, there is a co-payment, and there is a non-reimbursed product. So, but if we take it all in all, that's probably the figures.
Thank you. And real time. What I was going to say is to make the point that I think from the outside perspective, and I'm not a pharmacist and I'm not in the government, so that makes me an outsider. All people want to see is industry players and the authorities working together. So I think it's reassuring that you are all up here, that we have multi-stakeholders here, and that there is obviously a collegiate approach. And things take time, but nothing's gonna happen if we have people in different echo chambers shouting just to themselves. So, but that said, I'm going to ask another difficult question, which is that we have all accepted that there is not enough money and there will never be enough money. But if there is a budget shortfall, then that needs to be raised, or that needs to be fixed somehow. And the traditional way of doing that would be to raise taxes. But the pharmaceutical sector in Hungary will say that it already suffers from twin problems of low prices and high taxes, and that's not helped by the recent special taxes. So, and it's a question that I'm going to ask to all of you, but I'm going to start with you in this one, Katalin, because of your industry position. How should pharma be taxed? How should healthcare funding be raised that would be fair and equitable? And I'm sure you'll want to come back when she's spoken.
I'm sure of that. Actually, first of all, let me just say that I wouldn't be in your shoes, really. So it's not an easy, it's really not an easy issue, especially in a circumstance where, as we know, Hungary doesn't have like a healthcare ministry, which means that actually healthcare is really not on the top of. I mean, it might be top on our list of priorities, but not on the list of priorities necessary for everyone in the government. So first of all, it would be nice if we all could raise somehow the importance of healthcare. As Judit was mentioning, I know that the raise of the wages of the doctors put like an extremely heavy burden on the healthcare budget, and it needs to be continued actually with the nurses, and so that's I would say that that's a huge problem by itself, which is more probably harder to solve than anything else. With all that being said, I would still think that having such a high tax on pharmaceutical industry is simply unbearable. And here again, I have to say that I'm arguing not for only innovatives, but I'm arguing also for generics as well. Because, I mean, there are different kind of taxes, there are different kind of payback systems, there are different kind of clawbacks, but it affects everybody. Now, either if you want to promote local industry, or you want to have new drugs, or you want to have accessibility, or you simply just want to raise the life expectancy of Hungarian people, that's not a good strategy, to be honest. So with knowing that the Hungarian budget is in a very bad situation, and we all know that, still I would think that these taxes need to be immediately taken down. And I'm not arguing to say like, okay, to 0%. It would be of course nice, and of course it would be our aim, but but being realistic, still it would need to come down to a situation where it's at least affordable for the companies to be present here in Hungary. And in the introduction, you mentioned that I'm having this position since June, so it's not a long time. But I will have to say one thing that's very important for me personally, that since I have started this position, I never heard from any of our companies or any of the stakeholders that they will leave Hungary and okay, whatever, we just don't care about this country. So everybody wants to solve this issue, and everybody wants to help Hungarian patients. But the risk and the problem is that these decisions are not taken anymore here in Hungary by the Hungarian affiliates. Because if the financial situation for the company is so harsh that they simply cannot afford to be present or to have new drugs available, then we are risking that if probably they won't leave, or not probably, no, they won't leave. We can say that, and we have to say that, but still, there might be no new drugs coming, there might be shortages, and the biggest problem that I see is that we cannot work together with the local industry to have that HR and to have that sort of increase in human capacities that would bring on a long run some benefit to the Hungarian industry. So that's why I think it's very important for the generics and the innovative industry to work together, and also in this sense to decrease the taxes for everybody, because simply the burden is too high. I mean, we cannot, of course, say exact numbers because they are not public numbers, like for what are the different burdens for the different companies. But we all know that it's especially for example, with this 40% biosimilars, it's just simply, it's not us, but it's just simply not feasible anymore to do that. For our companies, it's like it's not feasible to bring the medicine to Hungary. So I would say that if we could decrease the burden, we could find some place and some space to maneuver, to work together and to increase cooperation within the country. But if everybody is trying to survive, then it's impossible. So that's why I would think that it's not the good angle.
Thank you. Wolfgang, where do you stand on the zero tax approach?
Sounds nice, but let's stay realistically, and maybe again start with the comment. I'm personally not aware of any Western country which is happy with the taxation system, especially around pharma. This is difficult, and this is not here sole a problem of Hungary. However, despite the magnitude of the taxes, I think what is really important for companies in pharma, but for any company, this is that they need a predictable framework. Pharmaceuticals, this takes years, and these are big decisions to bring them on the market. And if you don't have a predictable framework, you might refer from this. You do not do investment, you do not invest in the whole system, in the education and so on, all what is necessary around the product. And I think this is what I see, what is really a challenge in Hungary. Something can happen from one day to the other, and this is difficult for companies. I mean, the magnitude, the taxation is at the moment very high. We're talking about relatively low prices compared to other countries. On top, there's a high taxation. So this is overall, let's say, a problem. But I personally feel that the predictability is a big issue.
Yeah, and I can maybe just add, I think what's interesting as well is if all these things are interrelated. right? To make the point is, if you just think about taxes, and if we say, well, should the tax rate be 20% like it was, or now it's 40%, and what should it be, 21 versus 40%? Ultimately, I think it should be 20, but or lower. But the 20% given of itself is one thing. If everything stays the same, then we're going to be in the same issues that we are for now, which is whether it's 20% would be okay as long as that's part of a predictable and sustainable framework, as Wolfgang mentioned, but also providing access to the innovation. And so the hard thing and like Kata said, there's for the innovative companies versus the generic companies, we all have different roles to play across the ecosystem. But for companies that primarily focus on bringing new medications to market, it's not like we're selling iPhones or copiers. We can't just release our product onto the market whenever it's available and comes out of the factory, right? So we have to then invest in the research, invest in the education. You know, these are 5 and 10 year processes. So then when it finally does come to market, when we make our investments now, it's so that our new products will be coming to the market over the next 2, 5, 10, 12, 15 years. Which means that if we're paying a tax burden now, we want that to be generating income in the future. And so I think it's more holistically to think about whether the tax rate for 23 or 24 or 25, and more so it's all related that our tax burden as an industry has to be part of then the country saying we commit to innovation, we commit to the investment, and then it all kind of goes together and then we can all progress together. But if you take it just in isolation, you can't solve for just one of the equation.
And that brings us back to that point you made earlier about everything needs to go together. We need a holistic approach, I guess. Now,
it's my turn.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've been very patient.
No, thank you. Just a couple of things to really to think on. The first is that we do not spend the GDP, we spend the budget. So, of course, we can make the comparison how much percentage of the GDP we should allocate for the healthcare system or the pharmaceuticals, but we send the budget. And if we take into consideration the healthcare budget itself, you should know that in Hungary there is a very unique reimbursement system and healthcare system. The health insurance system, it's a Bismarck-based health insurance system, which means that originally it should be covered by the health-related tax. But the health-related tax covers the spending, only the 54% of the spending, of the expenditure. So all the others has to be allocated from the tax, from the other tax, and from other incomes. That's why it is needed to have the pharmaceutical industry tax as well, because we have to find some coverage on the spending. So it is, I think it's one important to take into consideration. The other is that you should be aware that the 40% taxation is affects only the 1/3 of the pharmaceutical budget approximately, because it does not affect the hospital drugs, it does not affect those that goes through via the DRG system or via the item-based reimbursement system, and it does not affect, of course, the low price, most importantly, generic products. So it covers only the 1/3 of the pharmaceutical market. So when we talk about the average and the holistic view, we have to see it in a holistic way. So only 1/3 is affected of that. Of course, it's a hurdle, and it has a very wrong sense. I would say that there is a huge, enormous, because if you think over that there is a 40% taxation, it means that we think that the medication are overpriced, nearly on a double, because we expect we take it on the reimbursement part of course, the 40% of the reimbursement amount, and not the price of course that what should have been paid back. But this has a message that we really do not value your drug in a most efficient way. So I think it's a wrong message, but we have to separate this message and the sense of this message from the real economic impact.
Thank you for that. Speaking as an outsider, I think the thing I found most worrying or disturbing from our keynote speakers was the shortages, and particularly the shortages in generics. So I guess what we would like to see is some idea of how do we fix that problem of shortages. And obviously it's not unique to Hungary, and that's a very important caveat. So we're not saying that this is a particularly Hungarian problem, but we live in Hungary, so this is where we need to see a solution. So Wolfgang, can we start with you? How do you see overcoming this? What would you like to see? And obviously you can't do it yourself, so what would you like to see done to try and bring some resolution to this?
Well, first of all, I do not want to play down the topic, but what was interesting to learn from the IQVIA presentation is that from this long list of shortages, only 4% were really products which cannot be replaced. I mean, the good thing about generics is that you can replace them actually. Yeah? So, however, it is of course a serious problem, and I think they're not so easy solutions, because I feel one of the reasons is for shortages, one of many, that we over time shifted a lot of the production capacity to Far East. And there are a few big factories who are producing all the APIs. And this was, by good intention, driven by the Western governments who are just focusing on price. And as a company or any institution where you have a need for a resource which is vital, you usually would not depend on one source, make yourself dependent on one source. You would say, okay, what happens in case I don't have this? And I think this is not really the case for a lot of APIs. So if there's any problem in this factory on this ship or whatever, yeah, then we have an issue. And so if we would say, okay, let's have a different approach, maybe more quantities from Europe or from other regions, this most likely is getting more expensive. Yeah, because at the end of the day, big capacity, big volumes means overall lower unit price. This is an overall rule, and there's a basic decision needed. And the other thing is, I think there's no relief in the short term, because to build up a pharmaceutical factory, I mean, we're talking about many years until it's really operating. So therefore, this is a difficult one. Yeah. And of course, pricing independent where the products are coming from. I think it's also in reality that usually what we see, a pharma is selling the products where they're getting the most money for the product, where there is also an economic logic behind this. And so this is a difficult one. But again, I think it is also important that despite the fact this is a serious one, we should not make now the consumer and the patients panic, because I think it's handleable, but it is a problem. Yeah.
And maybe just two more points on that. Any analysis that looks at over the last 12 to 24 or 36 months is going to also have significant impact from COVID, right? And so if you look at supply shortages from any industry over the last 2 years, because of the shipping routes, because of the overall cost of goods, because of the shortage of labor, you're going to see sort of some of these trends at least exist in all industries, right? But the other point that I think is just good to highlight what Wolfgang said is, more so in pharma than maybe other industries that other folks are represented here, you have to think about our fighting for our internal resources, whether that's generic or an innovative company, as a bit of an internal marketplace. So, you know, we are fighting for a manufacturing site facility. We are fighting with other countries for that allocation of quota to be shipped here. And so that's why I made the point a little bit earlier, which is when we're fighting for that resource and that quota, it all comes back to the attractiveness of the market as well. So it's not just about, can we secure whatever company I'm representing? Can I secure this quota fighting for this country or another? It's also fighting for resources, fighting for overall investments, fighting for capital X, fighting for long-term research. So it all is related, and that's what I was trying to highlight, that point that sometimes it's not so much about can you get the supply, it's also can you fight internally as well to get that allocation.
which is important for generics and for local manufacturers as well. And if I may just add one more thing. We had the Gastein Health Forum like 3 weeks ago, and there was like a huge European debate about shortages, like globally. IQVIA made very thorough research on what kind of shortages are there, and mostly it's antibiotics and painkillers which are high on the agenda. So those two basically are the most crucial things that we need to solve. That's why. And I have to just get back to my original profession. EU is trying to fight AMR, because this is really something that we need to solve, and we need to, on global level, somehow foster the research into this direction and to put some more focus on that. EU is trying to promote this also with the new legislative package that it's being discussed right now, and also like in general terms even right now. So that's one thing. So what kind of shortages do we have globally? But that being said, referring back to Matt, that's why it's very important, again, and coming back to the taxation issue, that's why it's very important to stay competitive. Because there is a growing demand in the Far East. We talk about India or China. Most of the basic materials are still coming, even for local manufacturers, they are coming from that direction. So if there is a growing demand there, and if they will not let those materials out to Europe, then we are stuck. So that's why it's very important, again, to take this into consideration. And the outcome of that discussion in Gastein with very high-level healthcare politicians was that actually the very low price of generics is a very, very wrong direction. So whenever you want to decrease all the prices for the drugs, that will end up in shortages after a while. So actually all the prices will at some point take the level what it actually deserves. And it's both for innovatives again and both for generics. Otherwise we will not have drugs in Europe.
So it's a case of allowing market economics to come into play, rather than
exactly.
choosing.
And especially given the fact that Europe is highly regulated, a lot more regulated than the US market or China or India or Brazil. And we are not that much. I mean, 500 million Europeans, it's a piece of cake if you consider the 8 billion. So,
unlike anyone else at the table, governments do have levers they can pull, and this government is not shy when it has to make a decision about declaring something a national priority or looking after certain areas to make sure that it can achieve supply. So what's the government approach to fixing? Well, no, let me rephrase that. Is there a government approach to fixing this? And if so, what is it?
Thank you for the question. Well, first is to say, I think we have to separate those shortages that are relevant only for Hungary and that are relevant through Europe. If you remember, I think the most popular and unpopular shortages in the last couple of years was when the hot liquid against flu has been shortages here in Hungary. These are OTC drugs, so the government has nothing to do with it, nothing to deal with it. So we really have to clearly separate it, whether is there a government any power to somehow to manipulate this or to manage this, or is there something that we have to do or not. But just not to make it as the last sentence, I don't know on time, but I would like really to challenge those issues that it is not good when the generic has a low price, because I think it's really beneficial, and this is crucial, and this is this is the possibility for operating a sustainable healthcare and pharmaceutical industry. So I do not want to go into details, but maybe it can have another debate on that. I'm willing to do this, of course. So we have to think over that. We have to really use the possibility that we have, and of course the generic industry has its competition. They are not forced to give the price. Of course, at the income level, they are forced, but upon that they are compete with each other. So they are competing with each other. So it's an interesting. But concerning the shortage, we had really problems in a couple of years ago, before COVID, 2 or 3 years before COVID, with the chemotherapic substances and used for chemotherapy, and it was really a huge issue how to manage it. And I think this was a turning point when we build an organization, we build a monitoring system, when we are aware of is there a shortage, how is the possibilities, and we have to collaborate. And that's why I'm pretty glad that all the part of the pharmaceutical industry is here, because we have to have a good cooperation with the wholesalers as well, because they are much wider see, or when is there a possibility somewhere in abroad to allocate some products into the Hungarian market and make it smooth if there is a possibility to get products from abroad. So there are some possibilities, but the most important is that we have a monitoring system, and we are really focusing on to be alerted when there is really a shortages to come.
Yeah, I think with any of these, it's almost not important that you have a problem. It's how you respond to that problem. And that COVID was horrible, but it made us think in different ways. And it's really how we go forward from that. We're beginning to run short on time, and we do want to give the floor the chance to ask some questions. So I'm going to skip one question, and if the floor doesn't ask that, we can come back to it. But I know one of the things that we were talking about very early was efficiency and increasing efficiency, and how doing that helps us solve a lot of problems in a lot of different ways. So perhaps it would be useful if we spent some time, some of the time that's left to us, exploring that. How do we make pharma better in Hungary? So how do we make it more efficient? What are the steps that will really, really work in this? How do we build, and kind of in a sense, this is part of it, but how do we build partnerships across the whole health ecosystem? So we're not sitting in silos or echo chambers, but we are actually working together. And perhaps almost inevitably, if you're talking about efficiency, how does digitization and AI feed into all of this? Now that becomes a very big question, and I apologize for that. But Matt, I mean, I know from our conversation yesterday that things like AI, the word science fiction is still buzzing around my head from our conversation. But I know that AI is something that you're very interested in, and I know efficiency is one of your watchwords. So perhaps we'll start with you and then open it up to the rest of the panel.
Yeah, and let me also start by saying something that maybe will surprise Judit, which is I agree that for some drugs the prices should be lower, right? And I think not just generics, but also when a branded drug loses exclusivity. And also, frankly, we talk a lot about trying to say, how do we increase the amount going in for pharma? I think also, just as importantly, the conversation should be, how do we also take drugs out of the reimbursement system? Something that doesn't work, something that's older, or not just older, but something that doesn't work. And so I think like this conversation has to, when you think about the budget, it's also not just coming in, but also going out as a first principles. But going back to your question, Robin, I think I'd also like to just reinforce for the group, what a remarkable opportunity that Hungary has in front of it over the next 12 to 18 months to utilize all the different data sources that exist here. And so for many other Western markets over the course of the last 3 to 5, 7 years, they took what they thought they had in terms of the data ecosystem and the EMR systems and the infrastructure and said, okay, now we're going to plow hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into rebuilding our data architecture and infrastructure. If you went back and asked those governments 5 years ago, knowing what's happening now with cloud computing, with generative artificial intelligence, and with the infrastructure that exists from an artificial intelligence perspective, there's no way they would have made those investments 5 years ago. Because now they have an infrastructure that they're going to have to disentangle to be able to now capture what's in front of us. Hungary doesn't have that problem, right? Hungary has this completely centralized data resource from all the way from the beginning to the end of the patient journey in the life cycle. And so if organized correctly with the right queries going in and queries going out, Hungary can capture all these opportunities. And so then you take that where you can ask a question like, what drug works best in what class? Where should we be focusing our attention? What type of healthcare model should make the most sense? What's the patient journey where we have the biggest bang for our buck? How much of our overall budget spend should be going to preventative or healthcare screening? Those are questions that you can ask and actually get an answer back and then make a decision that comes through. And then the ecosystem that's gathered here can say, okay, we are okay with this answer. And even if it hurts a company or a set of companies unilaterally, that is okay as long as we have the stakeholders that are invested in the long term to say this maybe hurts me right now, but it will help the overall ecosystem in the medium and long term. That's ultimately the promise of what's possible in Hungary, but to do it, we have to think more holistically than just one drug, one decision, one question.
So we're talking about systemic change rather than anything individual. Wolfgang, what's your take on this?
First of all, I completely share your view. EEST is really this is really great. When I present this to colleagues from other countries, they're really surprised how far the digitalization, at least let's say the backbone in healthcare is. I mean, e-prescription, maybe over 90% in Hungary. In Germany, we do not even have it. And this is really great. But now it is not really used now. Let's put it the other way around. There's a lot of potential for this, and I do not want to repeat what Matt said. But for example, compliance, how the possibilities to interact with the patients. There's a lot of possibility. I'm just lately got a figure from there's a company in Hungary called Recyclomed. They're collecting the not used medicines. I think this is over 400 tons of medicines which are just scrapped. And that is not only a waste of because most of them are refunded. It is also meaning the intake was not okay most likely. And if you look. For example, to the Netherlands, they have for 20 or 30 years a system where the pharmacies are actually calling up the patient and asking, do you know that you're running out of the medicine according to the database? Please come to the pharmacy. And so we can do a lot. What is missing, and of course, there's maybe a kind of death cycle. There is no refund system in Hungary. When we're talking, for example, pharmacies, they're not really paid for services. And everything is looking on the margins, and maybe to have a shift here might also help to increase the efficiency. But overall, digitalization, I think this is the easiest way to bring more efficiency to the whole sector.
Kata?
Yeah, concerning efficiency, I would pretty much say the same as Matt was saying, that Hungary has like a huge value in the data. And I think definitely on the side of innovative manufacturers, for us, data is something that we need to use and we want to use. You were mentioning the possibilities of where to work together with the government or how government and industry can work together. On the innovative side, for sure, and we already offered it to the government, we would like to work together in having the best use of this data. And for example, clinical trials, which is very important and high on the agenda of the government, and it's very important for us as well. And there's a possibility for the Hungarian industry to be more part of it and growing part of it globally, thanks to AST. I think this is something to work together on. And since we are having the data, since we are having a lot of experience here in Hungary. That's a part, for example, a good part where we can work together. And I'm sure that there are many of those fields that we can work together. And thanks to the international expertise of our companies, if we can bring that expertise here, then it could help the Hungarian healthcare system to increase efficiency, which is much needed, definitely. But as a last word from us, if you allow me still, I have to say that the decrease of the 40%, and not only the 40%, but generally, as again I said, breathing space for the pharmaceutical industry is, I think, a key for that.
Thank you, Kata. So good news. They like the fact that we have this centralized system, which almost no one else does. So, from your perspective, where can we better use e-pharmacies, e-medicine? Where can we use AI? Where can we dig into this data mine, this gold mine of data, and use it to create efficiencies?
We have a government program that is forcing the artificial intelligence use in the government, not in just healthcare, but in all where it is possible. I would mention two aspects on that. One, of course, it's an excellent opportunity, and we are obliged to use it because it's really a great opportunity, and we really have to manage it. And I think there are a good possibility to use it, for example, in the screening program, and to find those patients that have a multi-risk on different type of diseases, and alert the GPs to contact this patient and see what he can do on that. So this is one possibility. Of course, we have to have a possibility to monitor the real-world evidence from different medication, and it's a great opportunity that we implemented the outcome-based price-volume agreement system, which creates in some part the obligation to monitor the real-world evidence. We have to move on forward that. Concerning the compliance, I would mention that knowing the spirit of the Hungarian people, we have to have the balance between the big brother watching at you and on the force to comply with the use of medication, and sometimes it can be difficult. So, for example, I cannot imagine in Hungary when a pharmacist give a call to a patient that you will run out of your stock on different medication. It would be very interesting on that. We would have some submission for the court, I guess, on that, and not just because of the GDPR, but because of the spirit really of the Hungarian people. But all in all, it really has an advantage, and there are creative solutions to manage that and to support the patient to meet the compliance expectation.
Wolfgang, maybe this is to you, and then we will go to the floor for questions. But it was a thought that just occurred to me when you were talking about return medicines. Is there any system, is there any efficiency that we can introduce that limits the amount of returns, that we take the redundancy out? So is it a question of better education for patients, that you actually do need to take this course? And again, that's not a specific Hungarian problem. I've heard that wherever I've lived. People don't take their malaria tablets, and then they get malaria. So go figure. So are we talking about societal education? But are there other levers or strings that we can pull at to try and reduce that? Because if we're talking about a situation where we have shortages, and we're also talking about a situation where we have returns, there's an obvious problem there that's also a fix.
Yes. One comment first, what Dr. Bidló said. Yes, I gave an example from the Netherlands. I think this would be even too expensive now to introduce this, but there might be digital ways to just give a reminder or to inform the medical doctor what is the behavior. But actually, I think education is really important here. Everybody knows it. but sometimes you need a reminder, especially for elderly people. They're just forgetting about it. And we did once, we asked pharmacy customers, would you be interested in such a service, or what do you think about such a service for reminding you in time that you now is time for your intake? And it was interesting that they said, no, I don't want it. I could imagine it for my relatives. So this is, yeah, and the other one, are you, but useful, are you ready to pay for this? No. Yeah, but I mean, we have now this, in digital, a lot of opportunities to do this really efficient in an, with not many costs. So I think education, from my point of view, is the key here.
And that's true of almost everything in life. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We did want to open this up to you because, you know, I'm not a genius. There are all sorts of things that are important to you that we may not be raising. So are there any questions from the floor for this collegiate and expert panel? Does anyone have anything they would like to ask, or perhaps a thought to share? It doesn't matter if you don't, because they are very clever people and they have given a lot of information. If not, well, all right, I'll ask one more question and you can think about it. And then if you are happy, we'll just move on to the next part. Privatization of hospital pharmacies. So it's a bit specific, but it's important. And why is it important? Well, it was important because Wolfgang, you amazed me when you gave me this statistic that if we talk about the pharma budget, hospital pharma represents about 1/3 of the market. That's just mind-blowing. So there are these suggestions, and I guess we'll start with you, Judit, for this. There are these suggestions that maybe hospital pharma will be privatized, or parts of it will be privatized. So I guess the question is, how would this work? And then we'll develop it through the panel. Isn't this just going to open up the opportunity for distortions in the market? But could there be benefits from this? So what is the plan? Is there a likely time scale for this, or are you still just kicking ideas around?
Oh, it's really just an idea, and to make precise, it's not the privatization of the pharmacies, but just the operation of and the management of the pharmacies. So the pharmacy will be owned by the state and owned by the hospital as well in the future. So there is no plan for any kind of privatization on that. And I think it is important because what was really interesting, and I think Wolfgang, I'm pretty sure that he will reflect on that. It was a very interesting process that when the salary of the doctors has been increased, the hospital pharmacist's salary also has been increased, which means that they became a very valuable person of the hospital. Before that, they were really together with the pathology in the very ground floor or under the ground floor. And they became a very important person on that. And the lots of hospital has an enormous number of pharmacies, which has a result that there is lack of pharmacists in the pharmacy but which is a commonly used pharmacy. So it's an interesting situation. And that's why I think it is needed to have a professional operation on that, because hospital has no experience on that. So that's why it became this idea that it should have a unified system. It should have a common managing system, which can be really beneficial for the hospital as well, and for the patient, of course.
Thank you. Wolfgang, should we go to you next? Because you raised the subject with me initially.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to say there's not so many information around what will really happen in detail. This was announced, I think, in July. Maybe as a side comment, when we speak about predictability, I got it from you. Yeah, there's difficulties to speak.
I'm sorry.
Maybe this is an example, because maybe it would be a good idea to involve a few stakeholders, just that the market understands a bit what's going to happen here. As we said, that's volume-wise 1/3 of the market what is affected, and of course, most important, it has an effect. I assume, of course, the intentions of the government are understandable. But of course it will also have effects on operations of the hospitals. And I think what we saw is that over the last years, I think there was, from a quality point of view, as far as I can see this, a good development for the clinical pharmacies. And the clinical pharmacies are really important for the safe operation of the hospital. So I think what is really important here, that the clinical pharmacist still can work in an environment which is from a professional point of view tolerable for them. And I cannot judge this yet because it's not unveiled what is really happening here. And yeah, so this, so I cannot say so much, and maybe just would be good to inform or a bit better on this, or involve stakeholders to have more clearance here what is going on.
Yeah, to thrash out the idea, and okay, it may be an idea, and maybe it doesn't come to anything, but perhaps it does, and involving stakeholders in those conversations would obviously help. Matt, your company's involved in innovation, your company's involved in running a lot of trials in hospitals. Do you have does Novartis have an opinion on this?
No, I mean, I think maybe more helpful for this group would just be to go back and talk about first principles for operating in a market, any market, but specifically healthcare in Hungary, right? So just for any market to be successful, which is what Hungary will need to be successful in the coming years, you're going to need supplies coming in. So drugs come in, you're going to need an adequate amount of investment, right? I mean, first principles. Then you're going to need the right number of people to be able to work in the system. You're going to need buildings to be able to operate, and then computers, technology to be able to execute it, and then ultimately a sustainable model of innovation that allows new drugs to come in, old drugs to go out, and things to be invested, right? If you just think sort of path to left. And then underneath all of that, you're going to need predictable sustainability to make the model work, and a set of trust across the stakeholders to be able to figure out what works. After that, whether that's privatization of the hospital, pharmacies, a new reimbursement system, differences of effectiveness, use of artificial intelligence, all those things could be enablers, and all those things could be flashpoints that cause massive disruption and disagreement across the ecosystem, right, going across the bottom. If you look at the last 3 to 5 years of healthcare in Hungary, there's been much less interesting issues than privatization in the hospital pharmacy that have caused absolute paralysis for a number of weeks or months across the ecosystem. So this is why I continue to come back to this point, which is the building blocks, I think, are now largely there for the next 12 to 18 months. And the big question on success or failure for Hungary over the next year is going to be, can everybody work together, find a set of pragmatic guesses in terms of a model could work, because it could be any model if you look at the rest of the world, and then make those actionable. And that's really the success or failure criteria for me.
Thank you, Matt. Kata?
Dialogue, transparency, predictability. Those are the 3 things. And in terms of clinical pharmacies, I wouldn't say, I mean, we don't have any specific opinion on that as innovative manufacturers. We shouldn't, I suppose. But that's again, as Wolfgang said, it's again like an example where if there is more transparency, if there is more predictability, and if there is dialogue, then I'm sure that everything can be solved together.
Thank you. Yeah, which is kind of my summation. So maybe I don't need to do that. You've had that opportunity. Has a question occurred to anyone from the floor? No. Well, in that case, what are our takeaways from this? And I'm going to attempt to do something as the least intelligent person at the table, which is to summarize this. I think the most important thing to take away from this, at least from my journalistic perspective, which is sometimes offers a different point of view, is how refreshing and reassuring it is to see a group of stakeholders from across the piece who are doing something which is actually quite unusual nowadays, which is talking and listening and doing so intelligently and respectfully. It doesn't always happen, so it's good to see that it happens. I think there have been a number of key phrases that have come up across the questions that we've talked about. And Kata, you actually summarized it just now. It's predictability. And I don't think there's, I'm a business journalist. I don't know any business sphere anywhere in the world that likes to operate, well, I can think of one, but that likes to operate in an environment that is not predictable. That's what everyone needs. We need transparency. So if we have an idea about privatizing parts of, sorry, not privatizing, changing the operational model, then we need to have transparency about that. We need to know what it is. We need to talk about it. We can obviously have a conversation about taxes. Most people don't like, well, here's a media myth. People don't like paying taxes. Well, that's okay. No one likes to have their veins drained of blood, but my experience is that businesses don't want to pay tax, but if they know what tax they have to pay, then they can make their plans and act accordingly. So I think, and that ties back to that predictability again. And then we have efficiencies. Any system can be made better, and I don't think there are many people in the world who would say that Hungarian healthcare is the most efficient system, and I mean all of my wife's family are doctors, so I mean no disrespect to them, but there are much better ways the system can be run, and the system should be run. And there is also something which is relatively unusual nowadays, which is optimism. We have an opportunity. Matt spoke about it 2 or 3 times. We know that we have the EU presidency coming up, so we know that we have this data gold mine that almost nowhere else in Europe has. And we have an opportunity. We have stakeholders in place. We have programs in place. We have conversational opportunities in place. If we can grasp the opportunity, so everything is there. Now it's up to you guys, not me, sadly. It's up to you guys how it's taken. If you can maintain that collegiate approach, if you can find where your lowest common denominators that you can all agree on are, then there is an opportunity here which perhaps, and Hungarian healthcare has never been viewed, I think, as one of the, now let me rephrase that. Hungarian healthcare professionals have always been viewed as amongst the best in the world. The systems and the service that is offered, not necessarily. But there's a chance of a paradigm change here, which doesn't come along very often. So let's hope that we can take all of that forward. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention for this, our first Pharma CEO Breakfast. We hope that you have found it informative and useful. We hope that we'll see many of you at the next one, at a date to be arranged, but keep a lookout for that. So I guess the last thing for me to do is to thank our stimulating keynote speakers, Dr. Zsolt Bibiti and Dora Szerencsés, for your keynotes at the beginning. Thank you very much indeed. Give them one more round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. And if they were our stimulating speakers, then these must be our perfect panelists. So my thanks to Judit, Bidló, to Katalin, Szaloki, to Wolfgang, Wallisch, and to Matt Zeller, one and all. Thank you very much indeed for your time. And of course, our thanks to Phoenix Group and Benu Pharmacies for their support in helping make this come reality. We hope it was useful. We're sure there are learnings we can take away from it, so we would love to hear your feedback. Were you happy? Were there things that you wanted to do differently? Please come and find us and talk. We have a little time left for additional networking outside if you want it. But for now, I've been Robin Marshall. Thank you very much indeed for your attention. Thank you.